If you ever doubt that people can have some stupid takes on the Karmelo Anthony murder trial, well, sadly, you'd be wrong. So a jury convicted Karmelo Anthony of what other states would call second-degree murder, but in Texas it's just murder, in the death of Austin Metcalf. On April 2nd, 2025, Metcalf and some other people in a tent, which included his twin brother, told Karmelo Anthony to leave. He refused to leave. They were going to force him to leave. Austin approached him, and then Anthony basically said, "Touch me and see what happens." And then, without warning, he just decided to draw a knife, stab Austin once in the chest, and then he off after refusing to do so when peacefully asked. It was not self-defense. This was not a case of he was going to have the beaten out of him or he was going to be killed. He was just simply going to be pushed out of the tent. That is not justifying the use of a dangerous weapon to defend oneself when he could have just pushed back, or he could have just done the right thing and left the tent. And now everyone is acting as if we need to have another conversation about race in the United States. And yes, we can have that conversation, we should, but this is not the reason why. A jury rightfully convicted Karmelo Anthony. His life having not been in danger meant that what he did was murder. I think the right's reaction was a little over the top. They act as if every white person in America is done for, which is not the case. I think the jury, 35 years was a bit of a random number they picked. I think 50 would have been really the most that it would have warranted. Under Texas law, it's like 5 to 99 years, and you just have to pick within that range. And no matter what you choose, 30 years or half the sentence, whichever's less, is the mandatory minimum before parole eligibility is possible. Anthony has to serve at least 17 and a half years in order to be eligible for parole. Now, the thing that we should all understand is, obviously it was a messy situation, but the reaction on Anthony's part was disproportionate. Someone approaching you without having anything on them, he was not armed, Austin Metcalf, and then immediately going to stabbing him is going way too far. At the end of the day, it's a tragic situation, but we should not make excuses for someone who was nearly an adult. A lot of these people were saying, well, that Austin Metcalf's parents failed him, and it's like, no, Karmelo Anthony's parents failed him for not raising their son to have some common sense and some basic impulse control. We can talk about people and their personal boundaries, but the response has to be proportionate to what's going on. If someone gets a little close to me in a line at a restaurant, my first instinct is to not grab the grease trap and throw it in their face just because they got too close. It would be to say, "Could you please give me some space?" and then to let that be. I think those who donated to Karmelo Anthony's defense were stupid. It was a waste of money. It's basically going to feed into the narrative that, they're going to treat people as victims or perpetrators just because of the color of their skin, which is stupid as hell. Like, I can't stand the white supremacists who think that every black person, is somehow without impulse control or is a threat, and they use all these stereotypes, and then you have their counterpart, the horseshoe theory of people who think that every white person is some violent, regressive Neanderthal who can't respect black personal space. At the end of the day, it's a victim status from the racists on both sides, and when people act as if what happened to Austin Metcalf was no big deal, and that, black people as a whole have suffered more, and that's why Karmelo Anthony shouldn't be punished for this, they're functionally retarded, and they should not be taken seriously. And Jasmine Crockett was fibbing on the details of the murder. She should have no role in public life after she leaves office in January. And then you got Cardi B saying all this moronic stuff about how it was an injustice, and they were trying to make an example. Well, of course they're going to make an example. That you shouldn't just kill someone with impunity just because, you were told to leave a place and you refused. Partially the reason why the sentencing went the way it did is, I think some mitigating factors were considered. I think possibly the judge believed there was some remorse because he was crying in custody. The cynics will say he was crying because he got caught. The non-cynics might say he was crying because he really did not want to kill a person, and he was not trying to kill a person. But at the same time, I think there was some intentional forethought on this. After all, you show up at a place with a knife, of course for self-defense, which is your right, but rather than leave the tent, you choose to stay and to get the knife ready. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a deadly weapon, no matter what type of knife it was, as Jasmine Crockett was being stupid and saying that, it was like a pair of scissors. No, it wasn't.
A little bit of gray area. Because, again, me as a 5'3" woman, if a 300-pound man is beating me, like on top of me and beating me down, I'm not limited to fist. Because I'm telling you right now, if you are twice my weight, and got way more strength than me, and you got me pinned down, I don't believe I'm gonna survive.
Otherwise, it would be reported as a pair of scissors. All these people on Black Twitter are like, I'm gonna have to sit down with my kids and have that talk with them. And it's like, why? Like, yes, the cops are bad. We've all established that by now. Yes, this is not an example as to why. We can debate all day long about how the cops are f***ed up and how too many of them abuse people, but these were 2 high school students in a messy situation. This is not the same thing, and a jury holding him accountable, Karmelo Anthony, that is not racist. The outcome wasn't racist. Should they have imposed some black jurors onto the jury? Yes, but that is not grounds for overturning a murder conviction, because I believe that the outcome would not have changed even if there was like 3 or 4 black jurors on the jury. So I think at the end of the day, everybody needs to calm down a little bit. Anthony will still have some of his youth left. He was just about to turn 18 at the time of the killing, so he'll be about 35 and a half-ish when he is eligible for parole. He'll still have some traces of his youth left. There was one article that really annoyed me. The headline was something about Austin Metcalf's father and how his son didn't respect black boys' boundaries, which this had nothing to do with boundaries. He was just being told to leave. This wasn't like Austin was inappropriately grabbing at him, beating the shit out of him. He was like, no, you need to leave. That is not the appropriate statement to a man grieving over his son being dead. And when he was demanding that Karmelo Anthony look him in the eye, it's like, I'm convinced there is some degree of remorse, but not much. I think that at the end of the day, the jury got it right, and I'm thinking that maybe he should just do the full 35 years. You do have to make an example out of people. Messy situations happen, but it does not justify overreacting to that extent. That'll be all for now, and I'll see you guys later.